She'd worked a double shift with no tips. Her hands were numb, her coat was thin, and her stomach was empty. But when she saw a shivering old man outside the diner, she didn't hesitate. She gave him her only meal. No cameras, no witnesses, just compassion. What she didn't know was that someone was watching, and he was about to change her life. Welcome back to the channel where the rich meet the broken. And one moment changes everything. Love, lost, redemption, all in one story. If this story already has you leaning in, hit that subscribe button. Please kindly take me to 1,000 subscribers. It was one of those nights where the cold cuts through your skin. Not sharp, but deep. Lena had been on her feet since 9 a.m. The lunch rush had been slow. Dinner even slower. No tips worth counting, and the heating in the back room barely worked. She pulled her worn cardigan tighter around her shoulders as she cleaned. The last table, her breath fogging the inside of the diner window. Outside, the wind howled. Snow blew sideways across the street. Only a few cars passed by, their headlights glowing like ghosts in the haze. Inside, it was quiet. She was the last to finish. Her shift meal sat in a styrofoam container on the counter. A grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of soup. Nothing fancy, but she'd been dreaming of it all day. Her stomach growled just looking at it. But then she saw him. Through the window, barely lit by the streetlight, stood an old man, wrapped in a tattered coat. No gloves, no hat. Just standing near the trash can, hunched and shivering. He wasn't begging. He wasn't asking. He just stood there. Lena looked down at her food, then back at him. She didn't think. She just acted. She slid the sandwich and soup into a paper bag, scribbled "Stay warm" on a napkin, and pushed through the glass door into the icy air. "Here," she said softly, holding the bag out to him. He turned, surprised. His eyes were tired but kind. He opened his mouth to speak, but she shook her head. "Don't thank me. Just eat." And before he could say a word, she turned around, went back inside, and locked the door behind her. She didn't do it for praise. She didn't even think anyone saw. But someone did. From across the street in the shadows, a man in a hood lowered his camera and smiled. The old man stood frozen for a moment. Not from the cold, but from surprise. No one had looked at him like that in a long time. Not with dignity, not with kindness, not with humanity. He opened the paper bag slowly, steam from the grilled cheese and soup rising into the frigid air. His hands trembled, not just from the weather, but from what it meant. Someone had noticed him. Someone cared. Across the street, under the soft glow of a street lamp, Miles Dorian clicked one last photo. He looked like just another bundled-up stranger. Wool hat, dark coat, scarf high on his face. No one would recognize him. And that's how he liked it, and Miles didn't do interviews anymore. He didn't sign autographs. He was a billionaire, yes, but not the kind people saw on magazine covers. A few years ago, after a personal tragedy he still couldn't speak about, he walked away from it all. The business, the awards, the boardrooms. He'd lost faith in people, but now he traveled the country in silence, capturing moments of raw humanity, not staged charity, not performative kindness, but the real thing. And what Lena did, that was real. He zoomed in on the shot he'd just taken, a young woman standing in the doorway of a diner, arms crossed from the cold, watching an old man walk away with a hot meal and the faintest smile on his face. No brand logos, no filters, just compassion. "She doesn't even know what she just gave," he murmured. And that night, for the first time in months, he didn't feel completely numb. Miles slipped the photo into his pocket. Tomorrow he'd come back, not with a camera, but with a question. The next morning at sunrise, Lena returned to the diner early. Her shift wasn't for 2 more hours, but she had nowhere else to be. She wiped down the counter, prepped coffee filters, and set the chairs down, trying to keep her mind off how cold it still was inside her tiny studio apartment, where the heating had stopped working weeks ago. As she reached for the broom, the bell above the diner door rang. She blinked. The place wasn't supposed to open for another hour. A man stepped in, tall, mid-50s, dressed well but not flashy. His coat was clean, scarf neatly tied. His shoes, far too expensive for this part of town. He walked with purpose, but his expression was soft. "We're not open yet," Lena said politely. "I'm not here for food," the man replied. "I'm here to meet the woman who gave away her last meal last night." Lena froze. "Excuse me?" "The man you fed," he said calmly. "He was cold, hungry. You didn't know anyone was watching, but I was." Lena's heart skipped. She felt her face heat up. "I didn't do it for attention." "I know," he nodded. "That's why it mattered." He stepped forward, slowly pulling something from his coat pocket. A photo. It was her. In the doorway, holding the paper bag out with both hands. Steam rose from the bag. Her face, tired, serious, kind, said everything. "This moment," the man said softly, "restored something in me."
"Who are you?"
she asked. He extended a hand. "Miles Dorian," he said, and the name hit her like thunder. She'd heard it before. On TV and magazines. A reclusive tech billionaire who vanished after losing his daughter. And here he was, standing in her diner. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," Miles said gently. "But first, may I ask you something?" She nodded slowly. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why give away your only meal when you had nothing left?" Lena looked down, then back up. "Because he looked cold, and I've been there." That's when Miles smiled. Not the kind of smile billionaires usually wear, but the kind that says, "I see you, I believe in you, and I've just made a decision that will change your life." Lena poured 2 coffees and slid one across the counter without a word. She didn't know what to say. Miles Dorian, the man who once built billion-dollar companies, who disappeared after tragedy, was sitting in her booth, sipping coffee from a chipped mug in her tiny hometown diner. And he had come because she gave away her grilled cheese sandwich. "You said you've been there," Miles finally said. "Where exactly is there?" Lena hesitated. Then she spoke quietly, honestly. "There is when your mom walks out and your dad drinks what's left. There is watching your little brother eat the last can of soup, and you pretend you're not hungry. There is standing outside this diner years ago, hoping someone would offer you a sandwich." Miles listened, no interruptions. "So when I saw that old man," she continued, "I saw myself, and I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but human. I lost my daughter 4 years ago," Miles said. "She used to bring sandwiches to the shelter with her allowance. That's how she changed people, quietly." Lena swallowed, stunned. "Since then, I've looked for a reason to believe people still care," he said. "And last night on a snowy sidewalk, you gave me that reason." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small notebook. He slid it across the table. Inside was a check already written. But it wasn't a tip. It was a grant for culinary school. Room, board, books, tools, everything. "Why are you giving me this?" Lena whispered. "Because people like you," he said, "deserve to stop surviving and start building." But there was something else. He stood and placed the photo on the table, the same one of her in the doorway. "And if you'll let me, I want to frame this in the office of the diner you're about to run." Lena blinked. "What?" "I own this place," he said with a grin. "And I've never seen anyone treat it, or its people, with more heart than you." It had been 3 weeks since that cold night. The snow had melted. The sun was shining again. But Lena still couldn't believe how much had changed. She now wore a crisp apron with her name stitched on it. Her shifts had structure. Her hours were fair. The backroom had heat. The food, better than ever. And the reason? Miles Dorian, the mysterious customer, who had revealed himself as the owner of the diner. And so much more. But Lena wasn't someone who took handouts. She asked to earn everything. So Miles gave her what no one else ever had, trust. She was now the acting manager, draining to take full control, and every single staff member. They respected her because they'd seen what she did when no one was watching. That afternoon, Miles returned quietly. He brought something with him. He walked over to the wall just beside the register. It had been empty, faded wallpaper from years ago. Lena had always hated it. "I have something for you," Miles said, setting down a framed photo. It was the photo, her in the doorway, the steam from the takeout box curling into the frozen air, the old man's blurry silhouette in the distance, a napkin poking out of the bag that read, "Stay warm." Don't know what to say, Lena whispered, her voice catching. This wall needed a story, Miles said. Now it has one. He pulled a pen from his pocket and wrote a message on the frame's border. Kindness is quiet, but it echoes forever. MD. That day something changed in the customers too. They noticed the photo. They asked about it, and Lena told the story, not to impress, not for applause, but because someone out there might be having the kind of day she once had. The kind where you need to know there's still good in the world. The photo on the wall became more than just decor. It became a quiet beacon. People would come in just to look at it. Some left notes beside it. Others donated meals anonymously for anyone in need. Lena watched the energy of the diner shift, from routine to real connection. But one afternoon, a man walked in that made her heart stop. It was him, the old man, the one she'd fed. His coat was still worn, his beard still wild, but he walked a little taller this time, and in his hand, that same paper bag, folded carefully and kept. He sat at the far booth and smiled at her. You didn't think I'd forget that grilled cheese, did you? He joked, his voice soft and crackled. Lena blinked, overwhelmed. I didn't even think you saw my face, she said. Didn't need to, he replied. But I never forgot your heart. She brought him a hot meal, this time not out of sacrifice but out of abundance. He looked around the diner, noticed the new paint, the warm hum of laughter, the kindness on people's faces. You did all this? He asked. Lena shook her head. No, she said, we did. Me, the customers, the second chances. That night after close, Miles came in for coffee. He watched Lena and the old man talk and laugh like old friends. You gave a meal to a stranger, Miles told her. But what you really gave was hope. He paused, thoughtful. I've spent millions trying to build things that matter, but you changed lives with a sandwich. Lena smiled, wiped a tear from her cheek and looked around the room. Not at the walls or the menu or the registers, but at the people. This is what matters, she whispered. And Miles knew she wasn't talking about the diner anymore. 6 months later, the diner had a new sign above its door. Lena's table, where kindness is always on the menu. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't corporate. But the name carried a story that people from miles around had heard. Bloggers wrote about it. Local news ran a piece on it. A journalist from the New York Times came by just to photograph the photo on the wall. But for Lena, it wasn't about fame. It was about purpose. She had created a place where no one felt invisible, where strangers paid for other strangers' meals, where a hot sandwich wasn't just food, it was dignity. Miles Dorian, the billionaire who had vanished from the public eye, now came in every Sunday and sat at the same booth. He didn't talk about his money. He didn't flaunt his status. He just came for the coffee and the company, and sometimes to take pictures of the smiles. I used to build apps, he said one night, sipping his coffee. Now I build moments. Lena smiled at him. She no longer wore the same cardigan. Her apron was clean, her face brighter. But you gave me the keys to this place, she said. But more than that, you gave me back myself. That night, as the diner lights dimmed and the last customer left, Lena stood alone at the counter. She looked up at the photo on the wall, her arms outstretched with the meal. The napkin that read, "Stay warm," the steam curling into the winter air. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Thank you for being hungry that night." And somewhere in the stillness, she felt her story and so many others were just beginning. Years later, on a crisp fall morning, a little girl with curly hair sat at the same booth her mother once did. She was sketching quietly with crayons on the back of a receipt. Across from her, an older man in a suit sipped coffee. No cameras this time, just presence. The girl's name was Hope, and she was named after the feeling her mother gave. A stranger that night long ago. On the wall behind them still hung the framed photo, slightly faded, edges softened with time. But the moment it captured, unforgettable. People still paused when they entered the diner to read the words on the frame. Kindness is quiet, but it echoes forever. Lena now walked with ease and pride. She didn't just run a business. She carried a legacy, one she never asked for, but earned with a simple choice on a cold night. And the billionaire? He never returned to the spotlight. But to everyone in town, he was Miles. The quiet man who delivered fresh bread and took candid pictures of laughter. Because in the end, both he and Lena knew. Sometimes the smallest act becomes the biggest turning point. Not just in one life, but in many, and all it took was one sandwich. If this story touched your heart, if you believe kindness still matters, then don't let it stop here. Hit that subscribe button to be part of a community that celebrates compassion, second chances, and stories that heal. Because just like Lena, you might change someone's life, even when no one's watching.